Welcome back to another episode of How Do You Human? I am Sam,
Zaya.
and today we have a really special guest, Ian Sanderson. We're so excited to have our first guest on this podcast. We've had a couple opportunities to touch base and get to know Ian a little bit more. We're super excited to speak with him today, and Ian, I just want to, for our audience and our listeners, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are today in this moment and what's speaking to you?
Yeah, sure. First, let me say thank you to you both. I didn't realize I was the very first one. I'm pretty stoked about that. I hope I don't screw it up for you guys. But that's exciting. Um, yeah, right now, what's up for me right now? I was looking for a good location to do this podcast, and I'm here at my dojo um, in Boulder, and it felt like a good space to do this from. The backdrop is certainly much more interesting than like the walls of my room or something like that. So there's a certain vibe here too. So we'll see what influences just the space might have on our conversation. So I guess the first aspect for me coming up is as a martial artist. I've been training in martial arts for a long enough that it's hard for me to remember how long, 20 some odd years. And that's certainly been a major influence on my life, both personally and professionally. And let's see, I guess right now I'm thinking a lot about my particular role in the world going forward. I've been a facilitator and educator in many contexts across my professional career. This is just one of them. I teach at Naropa University here in Boulder. Um, I've my main background is in outdoor experiential therapeutic education settings, but that morphed into working in particular with indigenous communities. I'm Mohawk, uh, Wagat Nyagahaga, Ogidoroda. Um, People of the hard stone is how that translates in Turtle Clan. And so that outdoor work brought me into working with indigenous communities. That took us into social change, work with youth in particular, which extended to the greater communities, which extended into non-indigenous organizations and social change stuff and decolonization stuff. And that took me, let's see, into the post-secondary education world in various ways. It's taken me into indigenous communities. It's taken me into working with government sometimes, nonprofits, schools, businesses. Yeah, all of that has taken me into how to how to articulate very different worldviews and paradigms in such a way that they're useful to people without being appropriative of culture, right, and people. And yeah, how to find the epistemologies, the ontologies, the patterns across those things that seem to be really human. Actually, now that I'm thinking about the name of the podcast is, I've always been very interested in, um, as humans, we have such a diverse understanding of like what's up, right? Or like what might be up with this whole life thing, with this whole human thing. And that diversity is amazing and beautiful. And yes, it causes conflict across time. And at the same time, it demonstrates our capacity for complex thinking and understanding. And I'm very interested in what are the the patterns of knowledge and understanding that have arisen across culture, time, and space that seem to be kind of universal. Because I feel like um, if many cultures across time, space, ecology are hitting on the same kind of fundamental principles, they're saying kind of the same things, then that's probably worth paying attention to and exploring. It's like the differences are important, and sometimes we can get caught in them. And I'm very much interested in looking at like the ties that bind and paying attention to those. Yeah, patterns, pattern recognition, and pattern disruption, because there's certainly a lot of dominant patterns that we've inherited in a like settler colonial postmodern Western mindset that I would argue aren't very useful to us, to put it diplomatically. Um, and we could do with some expansiveness in our thinking, in our perception, and therefore in our actions. And so that's a long way of saying, what do I do now in 2026? What does that need to look like for me? How am I going to best be able to serve, the communities I'm a part of, and yeah, do what I can to contribute to this. How do we human in this complex, uncertain, scary sort of time? So thanks for asking.
I found a million questions within what you just said, but just touching on one of the last things you talked about pattern disruption. Could you just give like one example of the patterns that you're seeing that is not beneficial?
Oh, yeah. One that I focus a lot on is this tendency of modern thinking to be very dualistic and binary in its approach to things. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it this? Is it that? And I think reality rarely, maybe if ever, actually works that way. Um, in so many traditions, this is the illusion of duality. It seems like there's all this separateness and oppositeness, and and I think we've in this modern Western world really have become so susceptible to just arriving at this very hard lined yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad conclusions about many things. And it, I would argue, it gets in our way of really examining the context. In indigenous cultures, context is almost everything. Like it's it's very much taking in the interrelatedness of all things in any given situation as it is in that moment, but also as it relates to the patterns that it's exhibited over time. So it's this kind of both and sort of thing, right? Where there is this patterning to life, and reality, but that doesn't mean it is ultimately predictable, right? There is context as that the patterns continue in their processes. There's specific context. The three of us having this conversation right now on the surface has a pattern that's been seen before. We've had a conversation, the three of us, before, but that's kind of the extent of it, right? I had my day that I've had today. Thanks, Samantha, you've had your days. Those days were very different days than the last time the three of us gathered and had this conversation, right? So our context has changed. There's the patterning that still exists of us being in conversation. We look relatively the same as we did last time, but even that's changed in the last, week. There's just really just a pattern to our faces, but we're not actually looking at the same face. And in fact, we're not even actually looking at our faces. We're looking at zeros and ones beamed across space and bounced, around. They give a pattern of a pattern that we recognize as Ian and Zaya and Samantha. And so all that context, it's important. It's relevant, and I think if we developed a more complex approach to our thinking, that we'd honestly reduce the suffering that we experience. Because when we get into this sort of concretized binary conclusions about things, it often carries not just a lot of emotional weight, but also some misperception, what the Dalai Lama calls the chasms of denial or exaggeration. So we experience something that's um, emotionally heightening, which could be so-called positive emotions too, right? It could be bliss or joy or peace, right? Um, and it's just a human tendency to either sort of overly deny something that arises for us or overly exaggerate something for us. The kind of mundane example I use a lot is they haven't texted me back, right? Everyone's experienced they haven't texted me back yet. And so when we haven't received that communication back in what we would consider, right, a reasonable time, the mind starts making up stories. And they're very often exaggerations. Right? And usually it's about us first, right? So we'll exaggerate, oh, they don't like me. I must have messed up. Whatever. And we'll keep going off on that little story train of exaggeration. And it can even come out to, and like a Pac-Man board, it can go off one side and come back to the other side into denial. Well, I don't like them that much anyway. I'm better off without them. And both um, are diluting what's actually kind of really going on, right, for us. And we're not thinking about the all the potential context in terms of why they haven't texted us back, right? Might have dropped their phone down the sewer, right? Might have fallen a crack, dead battery. And those are usually the answers too, right? Like when we finally hear back from someone, right? Oh, my phone died. Oh, okay. And you've spent days spooling off into, right, your emotional, right, cage with all this narrative and
I like the
kind of this or
Pac-Man
that
analogy.
thinking. What's that?
I was saying I like the Pac-Man analogy where you go so far right, you end up left.
Yeah, and we see that across other systems too. That tendency, right, of belief, it can go so far, then all of a sudden it um, comes way on the other side of the spectrum. It's this interesting phenomenon. So I'll pause there. Just like that's just that, like, moving beyond the binary is like a few weeks of one of my courses just to get us to But that's the first one that comes to mind. Actually, the last thing I'll say about that is we many folks in modern Western culture are clearly seeing the limitations of the idea of binary, and so we also have a limitation in our language of English because it's not really set up for nuance and this kind of more complex sort of explanation of experience and phenomena. So people start seeing this whole binary thing and they're like, well, that's not the totality of human experience. and what's available in terms of identity or anything else. But the best we can do in English is to say non-binary or well, we don't like linear thinking. And linear thinking, again, has its place, but it's not the be all and end all. And so people see that and they're like, okay, well, non-linear. Um, Violence, which certainly is, that could be an interesting topic for us to talk about it at some point, talk about bringing complexity and high context thinking to this very touchy realm. But it can go the other way and be, well, non-violence. Even honestly, colonization, we have decolonization. And so that's all well and good because it's people beginning to ask, like, what's beyond these concepts that we've inherited. But because of the limitations of English, all it's been able to be done is say not what it is, but just what it's not. Right? Oh, binary, non-binary. Well, that doesn't tell you what it is. It just tells you what it isn't. And in an ironic twist, what have we done? We've just created another binary. Yeah, you saw this, right? We've just done it again and again and again. And like that's how tacit some of these like cognitive frameworks that we've inherited are. It's like even when we think we're stepping out of them, we're often just recycling them again, but we're not even seeing it. So it gets
That
yeah, it gets trippy.
I love that way of seeing binary, non-binary when you put it back together, but what is it in its togetherness? And it actually brings up a question for me in how you're able to bring that into the work that you do. And I don't know if that shows up with what you do with Naropa, your experiences and work in the dojo, but does that, would you be able to share with us more about how you bring kind of that context or that non-duality, or I was actually trying to look for a word other than non, into
Yeah.
your personal
Yeah.
into your personal life, into your work life.
Yeah, it's a great question. But like, yeah, you notice the thinking just already, right? There's another example, right? Oh, duality, non-duality, all the non-dual traditions, right? And it's like, okay, but what what is it, right? And the language is tricky. I do have an alternative for non-linear, which is omnidirectional. That's something I've been using. Um, all directions, right? Like that's the kind of thinking I'm trying to facilitate, for others is to have our minds just be able to go in any direction, not just right this like an arrow kind of idea. Um, how I begin that kind of moving beyond the binary idea is I've really enjoyed the works of a mythologist and wilderness rites of passage person. His name's Martin Shaw. He lives in the UK. I just really enjoyed his work because he, even his prose, still has one foot in the realm of myth. And so even when he's kind of speaking about these stories, he's still kind of in the story. And so it's a real, yeah, it's just, I find it to be just a really engaging material that he writes about. And in one of his books, he talked about how um, young couples who were thinking about getting married would come to him for advice. And he's like, I'm not sure why. I'm like, I'm the myth guy, the rites of passage guy, but cool. And he said that he would tell all these couples the same thing, which was to go out into the forest and observe the magpies and then come back to him after they've done that and tell him what they noticed. And he said most couples don't come back because they're like, We're looking to get married. Why are you telling us to go watch birds? Right. And he said, but those who do come back, they all say the same thing, which is that at first glance, the magpie looks like a black and white bird. And if you actually really pause and look, you see all these blue feathers. Because like these transitional feathers between the black and the white. And he said to them, he said, that's what marriage is. You have to find the blue feather language between the two of you. And I just like that visual and that metaphor. And so I just took it a step further and give it as an assignment to participants, students, when I can, which is after we've kind of unpacked this binary proclivity that we have, I get them to just spend the week just noticing as best they can when they're in that, this or that, good or bad, right, wrong, judgmental tendency with anything. Even the most mundane thing. Do you want Thai or Italian tonight? Like even like just day to day stuff. And upon noticing that, they ask themselves, like, what's the blue feather possibility here? What's a third option that I could present to my mind as a possibility? Whether that's with the decision making or whether you've made up stories about what may or may not be happening, for someone else. What's a blue feather possibility? And there's many more than just one, right? So it's not so much the blue feather possibility is a blue feather possibility. They're just looking for a third option to unstick themselves in their minds. And yeah, that's one thing we have. And even that has been I have a pretty good data set now at this point of people who have just taken this on. And even that simple sort of exercise has been quite profound for people because they're not used to seeing the tendency to just do that binary thing. And when they do and exercise the ability to see another possibility, it can open up, right? It's a crack in the thinking that can then kind of really open up more and more possibilities, which is really what it's all about. It's like why are we wanting to maybe exercise this in our lives is really in order to better see all the possibilities for ourselves, for our lives, for the lives of others that we care about that we cannot currently see. It's about seeing the potential of something that we currently cannot see because of the limitations of our perceptions. So
I don't want to
I
take
have
us
more examples, but that's one.
I don't want to take us like a step ahead, but I've been practicing that a lot. And then now one of the things that comes up for me is this space of really not wanting to make a decision. And even just that small one at the end of the day that you used about Italian or um I can't remember what other food you said.
Or, yeah, whatever. Take your pick.
Italian and Thai food, whatever it is, it's like, well, you have to make the choice though, right? Like there are some things where it's you then have to choose. And
Yeah.
I find myself getting caught in I don't want to choose or I can't choose between and it gets very tricky in the right and wrong area where years ago I feel like I was very one arrogant, but just in this to, make a decision, this is wrong, very black and white and easy to find that line. And then now you start exploring, as you said, all possibilities, and you see that things are not black and white. But then there are
Mhm.
moments in which you do have to make a choice on something.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this up. This is another piece I wanted to speak to. It's I want to be clear for folks watching, listening, that when I'm highlighting the sort of the dominant patterns of modern Western thinking, we've got to be careful we're not creating a binary in that. I'm saying that these are all wrong, and then all these alternative ways are right. It's more that it's not about getting rid of what we have. It's about adding on. It's an additive process. It's like, okay, you're really good at these ways of thinking, but they don't account for everything. They have limitations. And so what would it be like to have fewer limitations on your perception, on your thinking, and therefore open up, yeah, to possibility? Now, sometimes it is the appropriate thing for you in a given context to come back to a this or that. But when we've at least examined that thinking and played out, more possibilities, even if we arrive back where we started, we've at least applied some due diligence and rigor to our thinking. We are less susceptible for that decision to be just a like emotionally driven knee-jerk, yeah, kind of reaction or impulsive sort of thing. We've applied some rigor to our thinking. And so we can feel better, I would say, about even if we did come back to our original kind of, no, it's this. No, this is good. No, this is right. I think we can say we would have more confidence in that if we've just done our best, right? To apply some more complexity, to our thinking first. Same thing with another exercise I have people do is spend a week replacing the word but with and. And that one's a huge one for people because the word but really is a negator of everything that came before it. And by replacing it with the word and, it's an additive process and, right? It doesn't negate what comes before. It's just adding on to what has come before. And then same thing with like should and shouldn't. We always like, you should do this, I shouldn't do this. Like we either do should and shouldn'ts to ourselves or other people. And I ask them to like, be mindful of that one. Where's that coming from? Where's that certainty coming from? And at the end of the day, again, it's not about not using the word but or not using should or shouldn't. It's that by practicing these other sort of cognitive paths of exploration, if we arrive back at the but, we're probably going to be more confident about it. And like that's something that's actually really important to us. Yeah, but, right? Or yeah, I still think you should, but again, we've at least gone through some process of expansion and complexity and nuance and subtlety and context. And so we can be more confident if we do come back to those things.
I do like that. I love the and over the but, and I have found myself as I practice it, where I'll say but, and then I'll have to stop myself and like no and redacting the but. And I'm so curious. I kind of just want to speak this into the room. As this conversation is developing, the two words that keep popping out is emergence and intuition as a way to like possibly bridge context. And I think of emergence as in what's coming up for you in this very moment. And whatever that is, that's what it is, regardless of where it is in the system. And then maybe it's our intuition that helps us find that emergent moment outside of the realm of defining things. And I just have to share this one example. I often work out at the Sagebrush Park, which is in my neighborhood, and it's got like it's a loop around the park. And sometimes I'll have to decide, am I going to run or do I feel like walking? Do I want to go to this bench and do some sit-ups and push-ups around this bench? or there's that tree right in front of the bench. Maybe I just want to sit in front of that tree with my back to the tree and come into more of a yin workout. Oh, we got a cat. We got a cat in the video. But just in terms of talking about decisions, binary, negating versus adding versus context versus wholeness, I use that when I'm at the park. I'll literally practice what we're talking about right now by asking myself, what's coming up in this very moment? Do I want to run this next lap around the park? Do I want to go sit down next to that tree? Do I want to go to this bench and do some sit-ups? And so I find myself practicing emergence and intuition as a way of, I don't know, context, as it just made me think of that in the way that this whole conversation is starting to shape up.
Mm, mm. Yeah, the idea of emergence, so now we're potentially touching on like more sort of complex systems, which let me contextualize some things. Earlier, when I was introducing myself, I talked about finding the ways to articulate certain things for a different culture, so they're more accessible and more readily understood when they're not coming from those cultural backgrounds. And I found that general systems theory, complexity science, regenerative development, these are some of the ways that have been a good stepping stone. But it's important to say that there are so many things that they are not new. They seem new to the Western mind sometimes, like discover things, right? Like, oh my goodness, right? Permaculture, for example, there's nothing new there in terms of principle. Deep ecology, even quantum physics. Honestly, there's some stuff in principle that's not new for so many cultures around the world. The complexity stuff, the regenerative development stuff. There are new specific things through tools of modern science and technology creating things that we can observe things in a new way, which I think is actually pretty cool. But so many of the principles there are not new. Yeah, that's just important because so many things seem very exciting as they arise in the West, but I see it more as a process of the West starting to remember things that many cultures have just held as true for millennia upon millennia upon millennia. And so a lot of cultures are like, oh, well, so glad you arrived. We've been trying to articulate these things to you for a long time. And so in like modern complexity speak, complex systems, it's just like modern English words to describe just life, right? Like it's you don't go out and really create complex systems. Life is complex systems. Reality is complex systems. We've just inherited this paradigm that wants to make things very complicated. And I don't mean emotionally complicated. I mean from a systems perspective, like a very prescribed way of doing things, creating cookie cutter models that are replicable and predictable, and in an attempt to control that complexity, because inherent with complexity is uncertainty, which the modern mind does not love, right? We've had such a culture be developed of trying to control and predict that which is ultimately out of our control and pretty, ultimately unpredictable. Again, tap into patterns. There's some sense of predictability, but not ultimately. And the other critical piece of complex systems is emergent properties, right? There will be things that just arise through the complex interactions of relational processes that you cannot predict, right? And so, Zaya, when you're, coming up, um, well, let's say before you even go to the park in the morning, maybe you are thinking about that bench, and maybe you have an idea of what you might want to do when you get to that bench, but that says almost nothing about what you actually will do when you get to that bench. There might be a totally different emergent thing when you get to that bench. There might be someone sitting there. There might be a dog there. It might be colder than you thought. You might be more headachy. Maybe you've turned around before you even get to that point. There's 1,000 different things that could just arise through the process of you just being out in the world. Right? We can't even predict how any of us are going to feel in this conversation 10 seconds from now. Right? We don't know if we're going to get a bellyache or someone's going to yawn or you're going to get really hungry all of a sudden. It could change 30
I think I
seconds.
had a pre-yawn just now that was about to happen. You spoke it into the room. Like, oh, wait a minute. That's on its way right now.
Yeah, there you go. And so, in precisely the same way, we had lots of discussions around possibilities for the episode today. And we all seem to be relatively comfortable with having some kind of direction, but also being open to the just emergent properties of this process, this relational process that we're in, right? I could not have predicted I would be talking about this in this way an hour ago. There's no way, right? There's no way I could have predicted that. And so, yeah, the emergence, the emergent properties of reality, as well as the kind of ultimate uncertainty of things, those are, I would say, tricky things very often
I have
for
an
the modern mind.
yeah.
What's that?
I have an emerging question for you, kind of
Beautiful.
tethering in what you had mentioned about the magpies, about the but versus the and. When you have these assignments for the people you're working with, is this homework they have to bring back to the classroom, to the dojo, and potentially present in front of other people, or at least convene with you on it? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's most often in my courses because I have the benefit of working with the same group of people for months on end, which is fantastic because you can enter into all this complexity with baby steps and really accessible exercises and slowly build and build and build. Um, every once in a while, when I'm doing other kinds of programming, I'll set aside some time for people to do certain exercises in that moment, kind of give them 15 minutes or so to like work with it or work with it in small groups. And but yeah, in my courses, it's my homework is not papers and things like that. It's awareness practices. And so yeah, I'll give them the assignment, and then the expectation is for those who feel willing to share examples from their lives of putting that into practice. And so there's always folks willing to do that, and which is great because that inevitably sort of allows other folks who are maybe on the fence, gives them a little more courage to share theirs. And I'm sure you two have experienced this, is that when we share these things, it only ever just contributes to everyone else. By us being willing to be vulnerable in some way, um, it always just contributes to everyone else, and generally um, allows other people who weren't maybe wanting to share, gives them a little courage to share, and then that just further contributes, to the group and gives them overall more courage, and so they take on the next thing, and that they're willing to what I say, climb out on the skinny branches, right? Of the inner being, and share that, those experiences with each other. And the more we're willing to climb out on the skinny branches and share those experiences of climbing out on the skinny branches, the more everyone's willing to climb out on the skinny branches together, and talk about it. So yeah, that's the expectation, is they report out and share some stories from applying these things.
I was curious about, in this world of uncertainty, what grounds you in your human experience?
Um, Uncertainty. I was just thinking about this the other day. It's a great question because I realized that the same thing that can keep me small, keep me diminished, keep me scared, is precisely the same thing that can alleviate that fear, allow me to be bigger, allow me to be more coming from love. And it's that uncertainty. And that's the thing that we can forget when we think about uncertainty, is because we're both, I would say we're both hardwired and socialized to focus on the negative possibilities in life. Right? I think if you look at evolutionary psychology, there's I would say, some compelling arguments for why the human mind is by necessity biased towards negative possibility just for survival. It just kind of makes sense, right? We want to be paying attention to anything that would threaten us, right? And so we would prioritize that which might threaten us. So fundamentally, that makes sense to me. I think in this day and age, um, we have had so much change so quickly, right? In such a short period of time, that society now produces all sorts of survival responses that aren't actually accurate. It's just that we haven't had time to kind of catch up to the fact that these aren't survival situations. These are just challenging situations. And this, what we can forget in the realm of uncertainty, because we have such a negative outcome bias, is that we forget that uncertainty, um, it includes, another way of saying uncertainty is possibility, right? And we are afraid of uncertainty because we tend to focus on the negative possibilities that reside in uncertainty. But possibility is just possibility. And so by definition, uncertainty includes all possibilities, including the really cool shit that could be coming your way if you stayed open to that. Right?
I have,
It's yeah. You're getting it. Go with that. Yeah,
I have
you're
a
getting
follow-up
excited.
question to that because and I want to like land it in just a very simple definition. You're going to Whole Foods hoping for some ripe avocados, and it's very uncertain whether you're gonna find avocados that you can make some guacamole that night, or whether they're out of avocados, or whether the avocados are nowhere near ripe. And I'm seeing what you're saying. It's like living in the possibility of these ripe avocados being there is a part of your comfort zone, which I think is amazing. And the follow-up question is, when you do get to the market and the avocados are gone or they're not ripe at all, tell us a little bit more about how you find, or how you experience physically, emotionally, mentally, when those avocados aren't there, and when possibility doesn't land on the ideal
Yeah.
side that's driving you.
Bec-
I love the analogy.
Wait, sorry, Sam, were you about to add to that question?
yeah, just from a just in this way of because if you're kind of stuck on the worst case scenario, if that's, or if you're thinking about a situation where you have these uncertainties and you are fearing an outcome or stuck on a bad uncertainty, and then it happens and it comes to fruition, you're like, I knew it. You know, there was so much possibility there. So yeah, what do you do?
And can I just say this, and then I'm love to hear Ian. I feel like I'm feeling kindred spirits all the way around here because I also live in the possibility and the excitement of uncertainty. And I'm like, if there's no avocados, I'm just gonna go home and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and and live with that disappointment. And it's not gonna stop me from going to the market tomorrow for ripe avocados. It's just going to be I will embrace. It's almost like saying you embrace the shadow and the light to whichever comes that day. Anyway, that's like my own experience in the analogy, but would love to hear Ian.
Mm.
How does
Okay.
the disappointment
Yeah.
side, how do you live in that side of it?
Yeah. This is a good one. As is Sam, see, I knew it, when the thing does come true, like this, it's so unhelpful, right? Because it maintains our diminishing narratives that we have about ourselves when we get quote proof. Uh, okay, maybe I'll come back to that one because there's 10 different kind of traditions and epistemologies that attempt to explain or how to navigate what you're talking about, Sam, right? When it keeps being proven to us. So let me just stick with the avocados for a moment. And I love food. I love cooking. So it's a good one. And also, I'm making a connection back to intuition also. So, okay, let me see if I can pull these together. So, what comes up for me is when you're talking about the avocados, is attachment, right? So now we're drawing on some Eastern traditions and Buddhist traditions around attachment, and uh, and even there we say non-attachment, right? And we're back to the what it's not, but it's not necessarily what it is, right? We have attachment and non-attachment. Before the moment, we could say that when you're going into the grocery store, you already have an expectation of what? Ripe avocados, because that's what you want, right? Like that's your desire. You've already maybe had your future scenario painted out of like getting back home and making fresh guac for the dinner party, putting on. And so you get to the produce section and there's no avocados or they're not ripe enough. There's some kind of suffering, first world problem kind of suffering, let's be clear. But there's still some kind of suffering, right? There's because you had this expectation, right? Um, Suffering, right, or dukkha is, I would say, fundamentally occurs when reality does not meet our right expectations of what it should or ought to be, even if regardless of whether we're consciously aware of that or not, right? And there's going to be um, we are going to have these things because we're human. We are going to create unconscious expectations and assumptions and things like that about ripe avocados, for example, and everything else, the life we're going to have, the people we're going to be with, whatever it is. And so, what I think I've learned with that sort of disappointment is not about me not being disappointed. It's about how quickly can I let that disappointment move through and not get hooked by it. And as I say that, I think that's important because I think we have some sort of when we forget that to be human is the shadow and the light and the integration of all those things. But I think in so many like I don't know, like self-development, personal development realms, fields, there's a sometimes um, an orientation towards like just the positive, like just power of attraction, the secret, or whatever it is. Just think positive thoughts. It's like there's this weird kind of denial of the totality of the human experience. And I think that can lead to some weird, unrealistic goals of like, well, I will just free myself from suffering. I will not be disappointed. I will not be, because I'm just going to be so elevated and big that I'm not going to have those things. And it's like, I just don't think that's the way it works. I think it's more that there will be suffering, there will be disappointments, and how quickly can you see the suffering and disappointment for what it is in reality, which was just largely probably based on your presuppositions and expectations and biases, and that's all it was. It never existed in reality in the first place. Here's reality: no avocados, right? How quickly can you sync up the external with the internal? No avocados. Okay. Okay. Like that's it. It's the people who I've learned from across various sort of systems that I consider far more advanced than anywhere I currently am on any sort of path of understanding. They've all said to me that like they have never gotten rid of their stuff. They they have just developed the capacity and capabilities that when that stuff arises, they see it for what it is, and they're able to move through it with a speed that seems like from the outside they weren't affected by it at all. Did that make sense? From everyone watching, it would appear that they don't have those things, that they're not hooked by them, their wounds, their traumas, their biases, their assumptions, their expectations. It seems like they're totally free of it. And they're not. They just see them for what they are, and they've developed the practices from whatever practices they've chosen, yeah, to be able to just discern what those things are so quickly and move past them and unhook those things from themselves so quickly. It's like they don't even notice.
Yeah, and
but they're still there.
Yeah, I was even gonna say maybe it's not even necessarily quickly, but they just have a way to move with it, or you're moving with it and processing it. And I thought of the word embrace. It's like you're embracing it rather than rejecting it.
Yeah, anything we resist persists. That's something I feel that is absolutely true, just based on experience so far, right? And so this whole acceptance of ourselves, and getting into relationship, right relationship with all the parts of ourselves, and not negating, resisting, stuffing, repressing, suppressing, and finding, of course, intelligent, appropriate, healthy ways to deal with those. Because what I'm not talking about is full blown narcissism. You get to do whatever you want, how you want, when you want. That's not it. That's not it. But to bring it back to just avocados, it's okay. I wanted ripe avocados. There's no ripe avocados. Okay. What is there? Right? What else? So we're back to the possibility. It's like, okay, reality has just presented itself counter to what my hopes were. So I could either pout about that and complain about that and stay stuck in my attachment to something that doesn't exist at this moment, or I can like look at the other stuff, like, oh, what's this? Oh, dragon fruit. Wow, I actually don't even know what a dragon fruit tastes like. Let me get a dragon fruit. Let me try this new thing that's kind of been here the whole time. The entire time it's been sitting right next door, but I've been kind of attached to my avocados. Right? And
You're
so
right.
now my suffering, my disappointment is a point of possibility. It's right. There's something new. There's an opportunity here for me to potentially take advantage of if I can see beyond my attachment to avocados, right? Oh, lo and behold, there's a whole produce section here that I haven't even explored, because I like what I like, and that's not wrong. Those patterns are good, but it's they're predictable, right? And so opening up to new possibility also uh, involves a little bit of courage, even if it just means choosing walking home with a dragon fruit.
I was thinking as you were talking, so, you go in and you can be maybe stuck in this binary thought of either getting these avocados or not. And then if you are okay with that and accepting of that moment when you show up and there is no avocado and you open yourself to the possibility that you might like something else, this dragon fruit, then the situation could actually end up even better than what you had
Yeah.
planned. And it's the and not the but. So it's like
Mhm.
weaving all these things together in that human experience.
Yeah, what you said is just so critical, right? It's patterns. Patterns are neither good nor bad. They're just patterns. And um, some of those patterns that we hold on to are still desirable, actually, for us, and some really aren't. They used to be, they served us at some point, and they were very likely exceptionally intelligent responses to the world. And probably we had no choice but to respond to the world in those ways and therefore start setting up certain patterns of perception and behavior and things like that. But that was then. This is now. And so can we can we examine all of these patterns that we have and apply some discernment, some rigor? Is this, and again, not to judge them as like, oh, I suck for doing this over and over again. That's not going to be helpful. It's, oh, I've done this over and over again. When did I start doing that? Well, I was a little kid, and that started after this thing happened, and I decided it meant this about my life. That was an exceptionally useful and intelligent thing to establish at that time. But that was then. Does that pattern still serve me? Is it still something desirable for my growth, for my life, or not? And if not, um, can I be courageous enough to find intelligent ways to disrupt that pattern? Um, because what's on the other side of that might be even better, to your point, Sam, right? It's like it would be even better, but it requires that uncertainty. We're maybe coming back to intuition a bit, Zaya, which you brought up before. Like, it, how many of us have had maybe an intuitive feeling that we've kind of um, had for maybe even years that we keep rationalizing away out of fear or attachment to these patterns that no longer serve us, even though we know they're not very useful for us. This is what one of my teachers calls our cherished limitations. Right? We impose these limitations on ourselves. We have these patterns. Some part of us knows that it's not serving us anymore, but we cherish them. We still hold on dearly to them, even though we know they don't serve us. Why? Because at least it's known. It's a known quantity.
Back to the
And
knowing.
it's just a, is back to the knowing. Even
Being
if I know something sucks and feels like shit, I will still hold on to it because that is right safer, quote unquote, than the uncertainty, than following my intuition, than any number of these things that we talked about, right? And I think that's one of the big cruxes of this whole how to be human thing, right? Is allowing that intuition to come forth more, following it up on it, having the courage to disrupt the things that we know do not serve us, and we do it in spite of the uncertainty that comes after. I think that's one of the trickiest things. And I keep signing up to play that game because I've had enough experiences where I know now there's a pattern that I've seen that if you embrace the suck of personal transformation development, what is available to you on the other side of that is exponentially more than the suck that you had to endure to get to it. If that makes any sense. It's not even like a 50-50 game. It's not like, oh, what you get out what you put in. It's like, no, you get out orders of magnitude more than what you put in. But what you put in is like not pleasant very much. Like it's not generally a pleasant experience, right? It involves this like brutal self-honesty, a tremendous amount of willingness and courage to like look at yourself, to really see things, to not judge yourself, but commit to making changes. It requires us to, like the things that have happened to us in our lives that have created these undesirable patterns, like they weren't our fault, but they are our responsibility. And that's the kind of tricky reality of being a human, right? These things were done to us, yes, so and often very young, so it was not our fault. And yet we are the only ones who no one can make you change. Right? Ultimately, the best teachers, the best coaches, guides, whatever, they are not changing you. They are facilitating experiences in which you get to choose whether you change yourself or not. But it's ultimately our choice, right? Because ultimately it's our responsibility. If we want to transform some things. Right? And so, yeah, I'm fortunate, and I'm sure you two can relate that I've taken it on enough to discover, Samantha, what you were talking about. It's like, oh, by doing that, it's like so much better than you ever thought, right? Because you're back into it allows you to get in touch with the real um, desirable possibilities that reside in uncertainty, right? When you actually have a direct visceral experience of uncertainty going your way, then you're like, oh, okay, you're a little bit more resourced to, yeah, take on another layer of transformation and inner work.
mm. How about a collective deep breath?
I love it.
Let's talk about intuition. Let me ask you two a question. I'm going to turn the podcast around. What do we think intuition is? I'm asking, I don't have an answer. It's a legitimate question. It's something I'm always kind of playing with. But like, what do we think? Like, what is this thing? Because it clearly is an important aspect of humaning, yeah, and something that I think we've been taught to like suppress, and right, and yet we've all been bitten in the ass when we haven't paid attention to that intuition, right? We can all relate to that. But like, what is this thing? And in your worlds, how have you developed it, or developed at least trust in it?
I just consider it another sense in the same, like smell and touch. And I feel like it's this additional sense that is not necessarily connected to thought, maybe? Because it's like if I smell something and it smells familiar, I pick up a flower and I smell it, and someone says, this is a rose. Now it's like there's all this information building. And so if I smell that smell again, it's a rose. There's like this understanding for it. And even with touch, you touch something that's rough versus soft versus gooey. Start to understand those things based on language versus intuition for me is these feelings of what is best or like where I should or shouldn't go or should or should not do, but there doesn't have to be logic or language with it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it doesn't start there, right? Do you notice it in your body first?
Yeah.
Where do you experience it?
Me.
Or it's Samantha first, and then I want to hear Zaya. Yeah. So saying, where do you experience it in your body?
Yeah, and this is just my
Intuition.
best like shot at intuition, but I think it varies, but either like gut, stomach,
Hmm.
or in my chest, like lung area, like sometimes the beginning of intuition actually feels like anxiety sometimes.
I've I've heard so I've had this conversation recently around this idea of intuition, and apparently that anxiety that we feel isn't it. It's what we feel when the conscious kind of ego mind wants to like doesn't like the arising of the intuition. It's because that intuition is like towards something, right? And the ego goes, no, we don't like that idea. That's out of pattern. That's breaking pattern. That's stepping into newness and uncertainty. And so that's where the anxiety comes from, is the judgment that the kind of conscious mind puts on the intuition. I don't know if that's true, but that's something that was recently shared with me. So
I like
for what
it.
that's worth. Yeah. Zaya, how about you? Intuition.
Wow, I was feeling into so many different directions with that word. I think in terms of feeling it, I actually notice it feels like a bridge between the gut and I'll even want to say the crown chakra. It's almost like there's an alignment happening and some form of I guess, well, intuition, right? Consciousness or intuition that's coming through this alignment. Almost as if it's like when two things come into place, then all of a sudden here comes an intuitive hit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the, I think what's emerging right in this moment for me is our, I think if we get to intuition collectively or in a critical mass way, then maybe maybe we are creating a new system, a new quantum system of how we're going to harmonize, evolve, create, heal. And I say that because there are sometimes where I think there are sometimes where I intuit something, and I want to try to come up with an example. And in that intuiting something, it does not benefit me. So it's like here I am, I'm catching an idea, I follow through with that idea, and the idea does not benefit me. And then I question, well, is that still, maybe it benefited the whole, and maybe it benefited somebody else, and I was meant to be instrumental in something that I didn't need to benefit from. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think about intuition from that standpoint is I'm a part of a larger system. What are the times that I'm meant to be of service, I guess, or be of support.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So, okay, all this tracks. So, Samantha, this idea of like another sense, that both from my own cultural standpoint and also from my martial traditions, which is very different, where, one's, excuse me, one's coming through these very Eastern traditions and one's coming through these indigenous traditions, but they're still kind of saying the exact same thing, which is like, look, there's a whole host of things that we have as humans that are just our, um, there's nothing actually particularly magical about them. They're just human. They're human skills and capacities that we have been taught to turn down or shut off or disbelieve in. Um, and that if we were to just accept that they're just part of the human capacity and then train them like we would train anything else, because they're just inherent tacit, abilities that we have. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not magical and also kind of totally magical at the same time. And like if we can just embrace the paradox of that, right? Like, um, we've probably all had these like highly intuitive, instinctual, even telepathic connections, moments, and they are pretty magical. But what if they're also like the most normal thing in the world, right? And that we can just practice them, And what was it, Zaya, you had mentioned? There's another thread there. Oh, yeah, so like the intuition kind of externalized or sort of internalized. This makes sense. Like if we look at, again, Buddhist philosophy, indigenous philosophy, same thing. Dependent origination. All things, everything is interconnected. Right? There is no, there's nothing that exists in and of itself. Right? We only exist in relation, and because of each other. And yet there is a self, right? There is a Samantha of some sort. There's a Zaya of some sort. There's an Ian of some sort. It's probably none of what we actually think it is, but it does exist in some way. But it also doesn't exist outside of everything else. And so, in that way, the intuitive direction kind of makes sense. And I would say it would be back to context. Is like if you had that intuitive moment, Zaya, inside a context that was kind of about maybe service or community, it would make sense that the arising of intuition might not be about for you, but for them. Likewise, another context that you could be in, maybe just meditation or something, and then you are trying to think about, reflect on the direction of your life or something like that. That might be something that then arises intuitively for you. Something I learned through, have either you done like your Myers-Briggs stuff,
Personality
INTP,
tests.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that stuff's coming off of like Jungian archetypes that was then built out and, with a little more specificity. And something I learned, um, in that process is that for all of the archetypes, there's also, an introverted and extroverted, spectrum in which they manifest. So it gets even more nuanced, which I thought was particularly cool, because it helped me understand, some things about myself, especially in terms of intuition. And so my intuition through this framework, um, one of my favorite quotes is all models are wrong, some are useful. And I really love that because no one system has all the answers, right? And if we're not using right or wrong, we could say all models are partially accurate at best. Some are useful. And so I found this model to be useful because I found out with my intuitive archetype that it is it's an extroverted intuition. It's an extroverted sensing, as opposed to an introverted one, which explains why I'm a really good teacher. I'm a really good teacher and educator and facilitator. Especially if I get to know folks after a while, like here on the mat, my intuition is on other people, so I can end up like literally like kind of reading minds. Like someone will move and I'll say, stop thinking about that story that's about blah 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 blah. And they're like, whoa, what? Like, how did you know that that's I'm like, I don't know. I can see it. But I have a hell of a time trusting and developing my own intuition for myself. And like that's reflected in the Myers-Briggs stuff. So what you're saying about that intuition going in different directions, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in my experience, that's been sort of verified through other frameworks too, that we, through whatever reasons, we all have our own individual strengths, proclivities, gifts, yeah, things like that. And so I guess through my particular karma and experience, I've got a really good intuitive sense of others, but I'm really having to work on mine. Like how to develop and trust that internally. It's challenging sometimes because I don't know. I get stuck in discernment. Is this ego? Is it intuition? Is it anxiety? Like, I don't know.
I used to have that judgment. It was kind of like just like an ignorant, youthful judgment about psychics. If they could foresee and talk about other people in a way that was benefiting them, I'd be like, oh, well, tell me about you and how is it that you can help someone else in such a way that you can't necessarily help yourself. It just reminded me of
Yeah.
that. And I just want to say
Mm.
we in our conversations leading up to this, we knew that this was going to be a multi-layered conversation, that this would just be the first of many. And I think in a way to maybe create an arc for the ending of this podcast, I'd love to just speak into this space that I think the next time we're able to come on this podcast again and have a part two, we'd love to explore the beginning, like, you being from Canada, being a
Mm.
Mohawk in your ethnicity. So I'd love to circle back and explore the beginning with you in our next time.
Mm.
And one
Yeah.
other thing I'd love to pin for possibly the next time, or we'll see what emerges, is you really spoke about bringing useful things into your practices, into the communities, um, but not in a way that they're appropriated. So
Mm.
I remember that and toward the beginning, and I can't wait to explore that more with you in terms of how do you take culture, knowledge, wisdom, things that are useful, and somehow create an integrated, respectful way of incorporation without appropriation. So
Mhm.
just wanted to pin that
Yeah, that's
as
great.
something that was mentioned in the beginning, and also just thank you for taking this time out in your dojo there in Boulder, Colorado,
Yeah.
to be with us today for this podcast. Any, I know we're kind of maxing out our
Yeah, we
podcast
need to.
time today. Is there any just last reflections that either of you have?
Samantha, anything popping up for you at this moment?
Well, I have a ton of pins and notes, all kinds of things all kinds of questions and directions that my thoughts went into during our talk, which
Mm.
is great. On the fun side of things, I'm just curious what martial art style you teach. And
Mm. Great. Yeah, that's a great question. So this art is known as Toshindo, and it was created by a man named Stephen K. Hayes, who um, was the first non-Japanese person to be brought into these ancient martial traditions of ninjutsu in Japan. So when we hear the word ninja, um, all sorts of things just occurred in your mind, right? We got the Black Masks, then we got Ninja Turtle, then we got, Ninja Warrior, and we got all sorts of stuff. We got all sorts of pop culture, Hollywood influences on that. And once upon a time there was, there's certain kernels of truth to some of the black clad, masked, clandestine sort of things, but the history of ninjutsu is much more diverse and complex than that. And this art of Toshindo, the name, it comes from, well, let me back up. What Mr. Hayes wanted to do is when he came back from Japan, the traditions that he was learning, the techniques and kata in Japan, he wanted to bring those into a more modern context, because what they were learning was not the problems that we have to deal with today, but the principles have been tested for 900 years. What doesn't work doesn't make it off the battlefields, right? What works continues. What doesn't work gets left because it didn't work. And so I'm going to try and make this very short because we could do a whole podcast on this. But it's these principles from these traditions brought into modern 21st century contexts and problems in terms of personal protection and protection of others. But ultimately, the self-defense aspects, what we refer to as taijutsu, which means body methods, whole body methods. It's just like the very foundational platform in which to take on a path of personal transformation, if you like. The word ninja, the character for nin means to persevere, or to be patient, or to endure, to persevere. Ja is a person, and so ninja isn't talking about spies or assassins or anything like that. It's literally saying a person who is able to persevere no matter what. Like no matter what life throws at you, you are able to make it through, and not just endure and like grin and bear it, but like ultimately, ideally, when you win in life, when you persevere, everyone else wins. It's not just I win no matter what. It's I win, and because I win, you all win. That's the it's kind of back to the potential of something. It's not just getting through something. It's like I get through something, and as a result, things are even better than they were before. So imagine what kind of skill and training that would take to not just put up with something and get through it, but to be able to transform yourself, and the systems around you are transformed as a result of being able to persevere through those things. So yeah, that's a very short version. That's a very short version. Thank you for asking. In terms of anything that's left with me, I'm also remembering that we had talked about trying to get to this idea of resilience too, which is also a really we kind of touched on it indirectly. We didn't name it as such, but we definitely talked about aspects that I would say lead to resilience. But I'd be happy to talk about that idea too, because it's such a common sort of like sexy word that people like to use across the whole strata and spectrum of society and organizations, and every system kind of has maybe a slightly different understanding of what that word is, and yet there's some patterns to the principle of it too. So I think that would also be cool to add to the list, and we can talk that up. And like, what do we mean when we say, right, to be resilient? What does that really look like? And is it what we think it is? And is it more or less than what we think it is? Or is it entirely contextual. So anyways, I'll stop there because that's just kind of started a whole second podcast without meaning to. So I'll pause there.
Well, I feel like if we're gonna end on one thing, it needs to be your cat, Samantha. Is your cat with you right now?
Yes, and it's been very distracting. He's been acting a bit crazy, so that's why I've been on mute a lot, is because I've been nervous you guys can hear. He obviously made his guest appearance a couple times, so
Well, what's his name?
Chase.
Chase. And is Chase on your lap right now?
No, he off and on. He's just been off.
Okay. Well, if he was on your lap, I'd want to lower the camera, like and
yeah, we got to bring in
Chase. But it was nice.
Bring Chase into relationality. I'm always happy to have animals come on board.
Does Chase know we're talking about him? Does Chase know we're talking about him?
Come on. Come here. You want to say hi.
Come on, Chase. Oh yeah.
Camera shy.
Nice. Perfect.
Hey, bud.
Could not have asked for a better closer than that.
Yeah, perfect.
A cat dog, and he will bring you his favorite toy. So as soon as you guys start, he comes with his favorite toy, which is just like a piece of material on a stick that he just loves, like chasing around. So
there it is.
My favorite. Cat dogs are my favorite.
Yeah, totally. I had a cat who used to fetch all my when I would break a guitar string, I would wind it back up and like throw it down the hall, and that was her favorite toy. Old guitar strings. Yeah.
Well, Sam.
Okay.
Ian.
Yes, and thank you to our audience. We hope you guys will comment, subscribe, send us some messages, ask
us questions.
Ask us questions. Thank you once again, Ian, for being with us today. We're so excited to have had you on, and can't wait until the next one.
Yeah, me too.
This has been another episode of How Do You Human?
Till next time.
Till next time.
I just wanna wake up, get my cake up, praise my maker, ayo, 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 ayo. Nice. I was ready to keep singing.